Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed an honor to have you all here in what is, I would call, a delayed official opening of Remember Afghanistan, the symposium. It's a symposium organized by a campus student group called the Dialogues for Peace. We've been working on this whole program for months and months and months, and finally, here we are. And it's an honor we have you here. What I'll do, actually, my friends at DFP, at the Dialogues for Peace, have provided me 3 points and the time for that to talk on. And let me read what they have asked me to do. They have asked me to tell you a brief history of when was the last time Middlebury tried to get involved or tried to organize an event related to Afghanistan. The second thing they have actually written here for me is that I'll have to introduce the symposium briefly and what you can expect from the symposium and what we will leave you with. And the third, and that's quite actually an interesting thing, and the third thing they have written here for me is that as you leave the stage for Professor Stanger, there will be applause for you. Now the first point, Middlebury's history of connection with Afghanistan. It's an interesting story. As we started planning our event, we came to learn that the last time Middlebury wanted to get connected to Afghanistan was when a group of Taliban propagandists were in the United States. They were going on college campuses to propagate for Taliban and try and get the United States to recognize the Taliban regime. Now, how happy and how glad are we that that event never materialized? And Professor Stanger was one block against that, and I think we all know how glad happening that was. But since then, there has been less of a connection between Middlebury and Afghanistan. We've managed to put together the symposium now, and it's a week-long event with a series of lectures, a movie screening that we had on Sunday. We had a full house there, and thanks for everyone who came there. It was a good start for us, and it totally humbled us down to earth and made us expect more, and here we have it. What we have today is which Professor Stanger would later on talk on and introduce to you. We have a speaker from the Afghan Embassy in Washington, D.C. Tomorrow we are devoting the whole day to words that are actually very connected to Afghan woman, the agony of the Afghan woman, the struggles of the Afghan woman. And let me add one more word today with that, and that is the progress of the Afghan woman. Tomorrow we'll have 2 speakers on that. We'll have a discussion to be followed by that. And on Friday we have 2 events. First one is an event we titled Afghanistan's Legacy of Impunity, the Future of Justice, Afghanistan's Legacy of Impunity. Former Afghanistan researcher for the Human Rights Watch, John Sifton, will be speaking there. And I would actually want to advertise that event more because John said many of you would be interested in hearing from John Sifton and talking to him. John now is covering the CIA counterterrorism and Iraq for the Human Rights Watch, so you might want to be there. And the last event, the closing event of the symposium, will be more or less an engaging and interactive event where me and my colleague, my friend from Afghanistan, who's also a first-year student, Zura Safi, we will try and leave you with sights, sounds, stories, and images of Afghanistan and we will hope you remember Afghanistan with that. This symposium is all aimed at leaving you with people, stories, and sights and sounds with which you will remember Afghanistan. Here we are at the starting part of it. And now let me turn it over to Professor Stanger, one of my favorite ladies on campus.
Well, I'd like to begin by thanking Beslan, Hasib, and Pavel for organizing a spectacular event. And most importantly, I was completely impressed with how they responded to the strange April events of yesterday, where an unexpected snowstorm shut down Burlington Airport, which kept our speaker from getting to Vermont to speak at the scheduled time. And they responded to this beautifully, without any sign of external stress. what was going on inside might have been something else entirely. But I'd like to thank them for coming up with the entire symposium and a good solution. And most of all, thank our guest for being willing to rearrange his entire schedule for today so we could come up and speak today rather than yesterday evening. So we thank you for that. I'd also just like to add a little elaboration to that Taliban story, just for the record. I did not shut down the Taliban. But when they did approach me in 2000 about speaking at the Rohatyn Center, I did say that, well, that'd be wonderful, come and speak, but we'll probably have someone sharing the podium with you who will comment on your remarks, and then we'll open it up for a general discussion because we believe in the free exchange of ideas here at Middlebury College. They were not heard from again. They were not interested in speaking under those circumstances, so that's just a little postscript to your opening. It's my great pleasure and honor to introduce First Secretary Mr. Ashraf Haidari from the Embassy of Afghanistan in Washington, D.C. As the embassy spokesman, Secretary Haidari is, by all accounts, a dynamic diplomat. I hope you'll get a chance to talk to him afterwards, who symbolizes hope for the future of Afghanistan. He is an expert on the political security and reconstruction affairs of the country and previously served at the embassy as Director of Government and Media Relations. Secretary Haidari holds an MA in International Security and Development from the Georgetown University School of Foreign Service, where he was a 2-year International Peace Scholar, as well as a BA in Political Science and International Relations from Wabash College in Indiana, where he was a 4-year International Merit Scholar. From 2002 to 2003, he was a Foreign Service Fellow at Georgetown University and is a recipient of 2 advanced certificates in international diplomacy and refugee and humanitarian emergencies from the university. Born and raised in Afghanistan, Secretary Haidari, along with his family, lived in the country both under the Soviet occupation and the Taliban regime. You can put together from that story I've told you that it's the collapse of Taliban power that made it possible for our speaker to come to the United States and receive an education and be here today. During the period of the Soviet occupation and then the Taliban regime, his family was displaced several times and experienced numerous hardships. But Secretary Haidari did what he could to educate himself until he was able to go to the United States to study in September 1997. Secretary Haidari's talk today is entitled Rebuilding Afghanistan, Achievements, Challenges, and the Future. So please join me in giving a warm, delayed welcome to First Secretary Ashraf Haidari.
Well, first of all, I apologize to everyone for, of course, yesterday's problems. I couldn't get here on time. I know some of you came and probably went back, but I made it, and I was going to make it. So many people have worked hard, and especially an excellent group of students, very committed to Afghanistan. And thank you very much for your kind introduction. And ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of His Excellency Syed Tayyip Jawad, Afghanistan's ambassador to the United States, please allow me to thank Dr. Alison Stanger, the staff of the Rohatyn Center for International Affairs, and the Student Government Association for supporting this timely symposium and for inviting me. I am deeply grateful to, again, a very distinguished and committed group of international students for taking time off your very busy academic schedule to organize this week-long symposium to help us remember Afghanistan and to help us remember Afghanistan for several reasons, which I will discuss later. My special gratitude goes to Anton Altman, Beslan Vesenbeef, Harris Curtis, and my fellow Afghans, Zora Safi and Asib Hamayoun, and yourself. Maybe I didn't get the name, but thank you so much. And of course, Middlebury College must be very proud of your already hard work for global peace and security. And of course, you must be very grateful to the college for providing you with the opportunity to learn, to reach your full potential, and to serve humanity by contributing to international peace and security. And finally, I would like to thank the support of several sponsors who have made this event very possible. And I don't know if Ms. Fatima Gailani is here, and I'd like to acknowledge her presence if she is here too. Sorry? She's coming. Good. Good. I'm truly honored to be with you this afternoon to speak to you about the process of rebuilding Afghanistan, including our achievements since 2001, the main challenges that threaten the rebuilding process, and our strategy to secure the future of Afghanistan. The people of Afghanistan continue to suffer from the tragedy of our recent past, roughly a quarter of a century, very long, during which Afghanistan became the world's victim of the Cold War, main victim of the Cold War and its aftermath. At the dawn of the 21st century, the world had totally forgotten about Afghanistan, and the plight of the Afghan people was only a topic of discussion in the reports of human rights groups. Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch are some of the human rights organizations that were only talking about Afghanistan during the 1990s, when the conflicts were tearing our society and our country apart. The negligence of Afghanistan by the United States and the rest of the international community allowed regional powers to turn our country into a battlefield of proxy conflicts fought by various divided Afghan factions in early 1990s. And then the Taliban era. It ended factional infighting, but it carried Afghanistan back to the Stone Age. Barbarism defined the Taliban's rule, and terrorism their relations with the outside world. As a consequence, wars of the past 25 years killed more than 1 million Afghans, made over 1 million Afghans disabled, forced a third of our Afghans, our population, into exile as refugees, destroyed the villages where most Afghans lived, and caused a severe brain drain that drove much of our educated class into exile. The Soviets systematically bombed rural Afghanistan, and the factional conflicts destroyed most cities. As our state institutions collapsed, transnational mafia, criminals, and terrorists took over and based their operations in Afghanistan. The tragic events of 9/11, we all remember that event, remind us of Afghanistan, which had turned into an operational base for Al-Qaeda, from where they launched worldwide attacks. And at the same time, drug traffickers had turned our country into an opium poppy field. Ladies and gentlemen, despite years of suffering and victimization, the Afghan people have shown remarkable bravery and resilience, first to repel the Soviet invasion, and then to survive over 2 decades of war and destruction that followed. In fact, the will of the Afghan people to move forward for a better future remains the driving force behind the ongoing rebuilding process in our country. And if we compare Afghanistan with Iraq, we will see that in Afghanistan we have the support of the people, and human environment is very much support of the international involvement and international peace building in the country. And I think that's a strategic asset for the war on terror and overall international involvement in building a new state and building a democracy in Afghanistan. Last October, ABC News conducted a poll in Afghanistan and found that in spite of many socioeconomic deprivations caused by 25 years of conflicts and destruction, and to begin with, Afghanistan was the least developed country even before the Soviets invaded Afghanistan. 77% of these Afghans said their country is headed in the right direction. 91% said they prefer the current Afghan government to the Taliban regime. And 87% called the U.S.-led overthrow of the Taliban good for Afghanistan and our future. With the support of our people and international assistance, we have come a long way since 2001. Through the Bonn Conference in December 2001, we and our international partners reached an agreement to chart a political roadmap for building a new state in Afghanistan. First of all, we had a weak state before the Soviet invasion, and then the Soviets came in, and it was just purely communist regime. And then once they were gone, then the Mujahideen took over, and then they soon started jockeying over power and destroyed the state and state institutions. In accordance with the Bonn Agreement, the interim administration was inaugurated in Kabul on December 22nd, 2001. Led by then Chairman Hamid Karzai, the interim administration began implementing the objectives of the Bonn Agreement. Over the next 4 years, from December 2001 through September 2005, the people and government of Afghanistan met all milestones of the Bonn Agreement to establish a new state. We held 2 lawyer jirgas, we approved a constitution, and we held the presidential and legislative elections. We are proud of our achievements, but we could not have achieved these goals without assistance from the international community. Donor countries have generously assisted us with troops supplied through the Operation Enduring Freedom led by the U.S. and the International Security Assistance Force, or ISAF, led by NATO. With their support, we have disarmed 62,000 former combatants, formed a new national army, and we continue reforming our national police. We have also launched programs of administrative and judicial reform. The Afghan Independent Human Rights Commission has been established, and its role is now guaranteed in the Afghan Constitution. Our Constitution, the most enlightened, progressive in the region, guarantees women equality before the law and ensures their representation in both houses of the National Assembly. Last December, the first session of our new parliament convened with a higher percentage of women representatives, roughly 27.3%, than many of the most established democracies, including the US Congress and the British Parliament. So that's a great beginning for Afghanistan. The percentages for US Congress, 15.2%, and for the British Parliament, 19.7%. So that's progress for the Afghan women, and I'm sure that Ms. Fatima Gilani will share that with you, as well as their ongoing challenges tomorrow. We have also made significant progress in the economic and social areas. Our economy has been growing. Afghanistan had an economic growth of 29% in 2002, 18% in 2003, 8% in 2004, and we hope that the growth rate will stabilize at 13% this year. The Afghan government issued a new currency in 2002, which ended hyperinflation. Before this currency, we had several types of currencies made in the neighboring countries, which had sent the rate of inflation skyrocketing. I remember that $1 was roughly, at one point, 50,000 Afghanis, 60,000 Afghanis. And this problem was solved during 2002, just after the overthrow of the Taliban. By the end of 2006, our legal economy is projected to have grown by 85% since 4 years ago. The government is expected to have increased our domestic revenue from 3.2% of GDP to 5.4% of a much larger GDP by the end of 2006. And to help facilitate internal and regional trade, the rebuilding of a major road network is well underway. I'm talking about the Ring Road in Afghanistan, which connects the provinces to the center and the provinces to our neighbors in the region, which we hope will increase trade and commerce. Although our fight against narcotics is far from over, we were able to reduce poppy cultivation by 21% in 2005. School enrollments continue to increase with over 5 million students, mostly, of course, boys and girls, back to schools and universities across Afghanistan. And at the same time, we have expanded coverage of basic package of health services and distributed development grants to a third of our 38,000 villages. healthcare didn't really exist. Even now, we were talking at lunchtime about how the situation of most hospitals, even in urban areas, are lamentable. But the government has made some strides since 4 years ago, when people just died of any simple diseases, or mostly women of maternal problems or childbirth. And that still continues, but it's improved since 4 years ago. And despite all of these major achievements of the past 4 years, we face numerous complex challenges in rebuilding Afghanistan. Terrorism, narcotics, corruption, lack of human capital, and extreme poverty are major obstacles to Afghanistan's reconstruction. And I personally believe that if we do not address these on a long-term basis, they can undo, and very easily, our state-building achievements of the past 4 years. Backed by foreign governments and extremist groups outside Afghanistan, in fact, in our neighboring countries, terrorism by the Taliban and Al-Qaeda is continuing in the south and east of the country. The consequence of 25 years of war have made Afghanistan the largest producer of opium and heroin in the world. It's roughly half of our official GDP. And I think we provide 85% of the world's drugs. Heroin, mostly sold on the streets of Europe. And now I think some of that is making its way to the United States too. The problem of narcotics is undermining governance, rule of law, and security. And corruption is a byproduct of drug production and trafficking, and has also resulted from lagging judicial reforms and funding shortages to pay our government officials a decent salary. If you're an official with the Afghan government, you get paid $50 a month or so, and then if you rent a house for $200 to $300 a month, then you also have a large family of at least 5 people to support. Then of course you resort to corruption, and that's what's happening in Afghanistan. In addition, our population of 25 million is the poorest in the world, and it ranks the lowest on the Human Development Index. We rank only 173 out of 178 on the Human Development Index, according to the United Nations Development Program report on the human development. And our population consists of peasants demanding alternative assistance to poppy cultivation, refugees demanding reintegration aid to rebuild their lives, landmine victims demanding welfare to escape psychosocial degradation, farmer combatants demanding jobs to avoid resort to crime and violence, and the 62,000 people that we have disarmed might, resort back to violence, back to picking arms, and joining factions and to overthrow the government or challenge the government. And women and children demanding education and healthcare to rebuild the future of Afghanistan. And to overcome these challenges and address basic popular demands, the government of Afghanistan, with the support of Britain and the United Nations, launched the London Conference last February. The United States and 60 other countries and organizations participated in the conference. We presented the Afghanistan Compact and the Afghanistan Interim National Development Strategy. And the Bonn process, it was the international community under the United Nations auspices that rounded up Afghans of different parties and views, and talked about a political roadmap to build a new state in Afghanistan. And this time, once we just completed the process of building a new state, the government of Afghanistan took over and presented our agenda for addressing our current challenges and also addressing our future goals for rebuilding and development of Afghanistan. The Compact addresses our continued state-building challenges, as I just said, and long-term rebuilding needs of Afghanistan for the next 5 years. It sets out clear benchmarks and timetables to achieve specific goals in security, governance, and economic and social development, with goals in all of these for counter-narcotics. Counter-narcotics is a cross-cutting issue for the government of Afghanistan. It's a security problem, it's a governance problem, and it's also, of course, a development problem, and we are trying to address all of these at the same time. Among other things, our targets for the next 5 years include building the Afghan National Army to up to 70,000 soldiers, and the Afghan National Police up to 62,000 officers, linking 40% of our villages with roads and getting electricity to 65% of our urban populations and 25% of our rural ones. Right now, only 7% of the Afghan population have access to electricity. And when I last visited Afghanistan last August and September, we had power just for maybe 3-4 hours during the day, and then at night, and then it was off. Just imagine, being without power or electricity in the United States. Only a minute of blackout costs billions of dollars. And also, electricity has been an issue that has been ignored over the past 4 years. And having studied energy security and the importance of energy and sustaining economies and development and sustainable development, it's ironic that we haven't really focused much on energy and have not invested enough. I'm talking about the international community and helping Afghanistan get electricity. Because unless we have electricity, we cannot do rebuilding. We cannot do long-term development. So still, Afghanistan is a country without electricity. 6% of the population, a couple of hours of electricity every day, and that's it. Although donors pledged $10.5 billion towards realizing the compact, we will need $4 billion a year to implement the compact goals over the next 5 years. At the same time, we will need the current level of U.S. forces on the ground to be reinforced by the NATO-led ISAF, International Security Assistance Force, with a robust mandate to fight insurgency and terrorism in the east and south of Afghanistan and to help us with the counter-narcotics campaign. The issue of mandate is very important for the government of Afghanistan, because if the NATO-led ISAF comes to the south and east and they have all these different national caveats, then they would not be effective fighting the increasing insurgency in the south and east. And we are glad that that's being resolved, that the contributing countries have firmly committed that they will do counter-terrorism and hopefully help us with counter-narcotics. We are so far pleased with the moral and material support of the international community to help us stabilize Afghanistan. But our international partners can always do more to help us secure the future of Afghanistan and thereby maintaining global peace and stability. On March the 23rd, the United Nations Security Council endorsed the Afghanistan Compact through Resolution 1662 and called on the international community to continue helping us achieve our long-term rebuilding and developmental goals. We welcome the Security Council resolution, which is a clear reflection of international consensus on the need to rebuild Afghanistan. But we expect the words to match actions by helping us implement the objectives of the Afghanistan Compact in the way the government and people of Afghanistan have proposed in our national development strategy. For those who are really interested in Afghanistan and how the situation will evolve there, I suggest that you read both the Compact and the National Development Strategy, two very solid documents of our vision for the future of Afghanistan and current events there. It has a website, and I'll send it to you to share with your classmates and those interested in Afghanistan. More than a week ago, on March the 20th, we held the first ministerial meeting with the United States government on the further implementation of the Afghan and U.S. strategic partnership in Washington, and I was very much a part of this. The talks followed the declaration by President Karzai and President Bush of a U.S.-Afghan strategic partnership in May 2005. It was a sitting document. We had not talked about its operationalization, and this was the first meeting to discuss the implementation of the strategic partnership in three main areas: security, governance, and prosperity. I believe that the full operationalization of the U.S.-Afghan strategic partnership is in the best long-term interest of both American national security and Afghanistan's peace-building process. The unfortunate events of September 11 is a sad reminder of the fact that the neglected and collapsed state like Afghanistan of the Taliban era can harm American interests at home and overseas. And we think that we should fully implement this strategic partnership in all the three areas that I mentioned on a long-term basis. We celebrate our many achievements, I mentioned, and pursue our strategic initiatives with the United States. But we are realistic and know that the road ahead remains long. And our journey to rebuild Afghanistan will not end anytime soon. We're talking about building a new state and a country that was destroyed continuously for the past 25 years, and a country that has suffered the most since the end of the World War II. If you study all these different war-torn countries and post-conflict societies, our people have suffered the most and continue suffering as a result of the years of war and destruction. And we fully understand that Afghanistan's secure future depends on continuing to strengthen the circle of justice in our country. And the circle of justice, which the 9th century Islamic scholar Ibn Qubaydah described as follows: there can be no government without an army, no army without money, no money without prosperity, and no prosperity without justice and good administration. And I think there can be no circle of justice in the first place without human capital, which our nation direly lacks today. Building institutional capacity is our number one priority. And it is an area where American institutions of higher learning, such as Middlebury College, can help Afghanistan through educating more of our youth today for tomorrow's visionary leadership. We need leaders. And that's why I'm here. I'm young, but I try to be a leader. And he's a leader, and Zora is a leader. So we need your help. And thanks to your college, the admission of 2 outstanding Afghan students, Zora and Nasib, will go a long way to help them achieve their dreams for Afghanistan. The Symposium is a prime example of their commitment to rebuilding our motherland and their contribution towards achieving the mission of this college to make a global impact, and I think they are doing that. I'm very proud of you. I look forward to seeing more Afghan students on your beautiful campus when I come back in the future. And thank you all for remembering Afghanistan. Thank you. Of course, I'll be glad to take questions. Afghanistan is such a complex place and complex politics and complex history that I could not cover everything in my notes, so I'll be glad to discuss your questions. Sure.
I guess this is more of like a generic question about diplomacy in general, but I guess first, just you work for the U.S. Embassy, right? So are you like an employee, Zamiki employee of the U.S.?
No, I work for the Afghan Embassy.
The Afghan Embassy?
Yes.
Oh, so that's what I thought.
Yes, in Washington, D.C.
But
Yes.
do you find that, it's, I guess there's often the sort of conflict of interest where you know you have to give something up, and how does that, how do you feel about the whole process, and what is it like to have to work out these agreements and dealing with issues where you know you're going to have to, I guess it's, I don't know, I guess that kind of is confused about the whole thing.
The process of...
I guess my question doesn't really apply anymore. But.
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Let's see. Come back to me now.
Sure, no problem. Sure, yes.
Are you asking something about like concessions? Maybe
Well,
because I'm interested in.
I was thinking, if you could deal with like a conflict of interest, like if the U.S. was, pushing, I guess it does still work. If the U.S. is saying that, they want to invest money or some sort of, thing, like a developmental program of some sort, some sort of agenda that I guess is driven by, the official sort of U.S. State Department mottos, protecting the security of the U.S. and its assets abroad and all that. And yet you are, clearly looking out for the well-being of the Afghan people. And so those things don't always line up exactly right, and how to deal with the kind of that whole process of, how to
Conflict, yeah.
It,
I think, yes, of course, there are always conflict of interests. we are the sovereign nation, US is a sovereign nation. But over the past 4 years, of course, we have so much in common in terms of fighting the war on terrorism. And Afghanistan was neglected for so many years, as a result of which the 9/11 terrorist attacks happened. And the reason why the U.S. went to Afghanistan was to respond to that. And we know that if the U.S. is out today, tomorrow, the situation will worsen. We have the Taliban terrorists, Al-Qaeda is there, and then we also have, the former combatants that, due to lack of any opportunity, then they will also resort back to violence, and basically the state would collapse again. And then we would have a situation where American interests, be it here or abroad, overseas, will be jeopardized and threatened. And so, and it's based on those common interests of fighting Al-Qaeda and building a new state in Afghanistan, through which we also, securing your interests and the interests of the world. I don't know if that answered your question or not, but we have come. Sure.
Yeah, I'm curious about the size of the U.S. presence in Afghanistan in terms of the number of troops we have and what kind of role those troops or diplomats or whatnot are playing in Afghanistan.
Yes, the number of troops is right now 18,000 American troops, mostly deployed in the south and east of Afghanistan, where they do the heavy work of stabilization and counterterrorism and insurgency. But the number will be reduced to 16,500 by, I think, this summer, because we will get more ISAF forces to replace them. And we were assured during the U.S.-Afghan strategic partnership talks that the U.S. That reduction would not mean that the U.S. would, over time, withdraw its forces from Afghanistan, that they would not be a supplement to the NATO force, but that they would stay there. So, and then we have, I think, a U.S. embassy in Kabul staffed by some 300 people, including diplomats and different contractors that work within different departments of the embassy.
Do you feel, I think after the invasion of Afghanistan, once that was over, there was a critique that the U.S. had kind of forgotten about Afghanistan and moved on to Iraq. Do you feel like we should be doing more in Afghanistan and that it kind of got pushed to the side because of Iraq?
Of course, more can be done, and we are always asking everyone to do more to help Afghanistan, because it serves everyone's interest. A secure Afghanistan means a secure international community. And of course, when you have, you have so much resource and that can be committed to one or two countries. So when you have Afghanistan and you go to Iraq, that requires resources, and inevitably some of your resources that might be committed to one country like Afghanistan could be diverted to Iraq. And so that situation, of course, did reduce some attention and resources from peace building in Afghanistan to Iraq. But we are satisfied with the level of U.S. commitment and the resources that they are channeling through different programs to help us rebuild Afghanistan. Sure.
This is sort of similar. I was hoping you could elaborate a little more on the status of Al-Qaeda. What's their operating strength, and what can we expect from them in the near future?
Al-Qaeda is there. They're very active outside Afghanistan, and it's that support that they get outside Afghanistan, just across our border and the neighboring countries, that they get training, they get their weapons, and they daily, cross the border, attack soft targets, teachers, schools, even coalition forces, and then they run back into a foreign territory. So and I think the coalition mandate is limited to just chasing them outside Afghanistan. So what they do is basically it's a guerrilla warfare where they come, attack, and then run back. And that's a problem that we have, of course, raised with the U.S. government and raised with Pakistan and other countries concerned, especially with Pakistan. During President Karzai's state visit to Pakistan, we provided the Pakistani government with actionable intelligence on the training camps of terrorists, their names and specific information that they could go after them and arrest them and close down those camps. Well, we got the suggestion that let's fence the border, and our foreign minister said, no, let's just not fence the border, but let's fence around the terrorist training camps.
Mr. Secretary, if you don't mind, can I help with just choosing this
Sure.
the questions? Yes, please.
You said that the Afghan constitution is the most enlightened and progressive constitution in the region. It was brought to the world's attention a couple of weeks ago that there was an Afghan man who converted from Islam to Christianity. He was sentenced to the death penalty. It seems to me in a progressive and enlightened constitution that would allow for freedom of religion, freedom of worship, which is also in compliance with Sharia, as most Islamic scholars all the way back in the 7th century have called for freedom of religion, freedom of worship. The Quran says there's no compulsion of religion. How in your opinion, should Afghanistan overcome this obstacle? And in your judgment, does it seem like Afghanistan will even attempt to overcome this obstacle of lack of freedom of religion?
Of course, it takes time. If we go back to the American history, and study the path dependency of, the old world, Europe, where, we had religious persecution, and from which Americans flew and came to, the New World. They came mainly for two reasons: God and God, economic prosperity, and religious freedom. And so we have come, at least about 400 years, and over 400 years, our democracy here in the U.S., I'm talking, has evolved. And as this has evolved, and people have evolved through education, social development, and we hope that the same would happen in Afghanistan. We have just, started building a new state and committed to democratization, and I've committed to international laws, including the Declaration on Human Rights, that with social development, with time, these things will be addressed.
Nima in the back.
Something really puzzled me last a few weeks ago, and it was the change of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Afghanistan from Dr. Abdullah to Dr. Sabanta. Well, I didn't find any justification about it until Hasib sent me a link of a speech that Dr. Sabanta had given. Hasib wanted to prove to me that he was a really good Persian speaker. Then something that was really interesting inside his speech was one point that he made about the Ministry of Foreign Affairs during the time of Dr. Abdullah. And that was the fact that Dr. Abdullah wasn't successful in integrating a lot of sects, a lot of tribes, different tribes inside the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It was an enlightening point for me, and I think he wasn't really diplomatic by saying that. I think he gave it away that right now there is a huge problem in Ministry of Foreign Affairs in integrating different representatives from different tribes. And I find it an actual problem because just the minister has to know the foreign language, and if you are coming from outside Afghanistan, you're probably more liberal and a little bit more moderate as well. So my question is, by the past that Dr. Sabanta has had, but by the criticisms on his past when he was elected, he was chosen for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, do you think he's going to be successful in integration of the tribe inside the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, or do you think Afghanistan is still going to have problems?
I think it depends on the reforms. If he implements the reforms, and all our ministries and institutions need reform, then of course, when you reform based on balanced ethnic representation, and based on merit, whoever is qualified for the job. That's what I would do. I would just bring smart people of all different ethnic groups, not for the sake of balancing to have a Pashtun or a Tajik or a Hazara, but it's finding the right people in these different ethnicities to help execute the task of rebuilding in Afghanistan. And I think Minister Abdullah did serve the country and during a very tough time. And of course, we had a legacy of 25 years of war, and then the jihad, and then there were reasons why he couldn't include as much as he probably wanted. And now we have a democratic process. The president has chosen Dr. Spanta, and the list has been submitted to our parliament. The parliament will debate that and then decide. So it's a routine thing, I think, in any democracy, including in the U.S. Think about the formation of the U.S. cabinet here. But we hope that whoever takes over, whoever is truly qualified, will implement the reforms to really Ministry of Foreign Affairs is one of our key ministries in terms of sustaining international interests in Afghanistan, in terms of bringing economic assistance and political will to help the country rebuild on a long-term basis.
The lady all the way in the back, please.
I was wondering where most of the money comes from that goes towards rebuilding and developing Afghanistan, and what sort of policies go along with that money, for instance, structural adjustment programs, market policies, etc.
Yes, I think a lot of money come from most developed countries. Of course, US is our biggest donor, and then European Union, and then also individual countries. Like Japan is our biggest donor and is the lead nation on the process of DDR, disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration. And then also we have commitments to IMF and World Bank that we have been able over the past three years to fulfill. And also multilateral institutions such as World Bank, IMF, Asian Development Bank that have given us grants or low interest loans for various reconstruction projects. The policies have been different over the past 4 years with the signing of the compact, Afghanistan Compact, and the Afghan National Development Strategy in London in late January, early February. Things should change. We hope that the international community would channel the resources through government and institutions, because if we need to build the capacity of the Afghan people and our government, then we need to do that. If you work outside the government, then tomorrow some crisis might happen, you just exit, and then there's no capacity in our government. And we have also, this hasn't been the case. So in cases where they can do that, we'd be very happy. In cases where they still, make an issue out of, lack of absorptive capacity and our lack of capacity to absorb aid and to implement major projects, we would like them to follow the strategy and the goals of the 5-year compact. And so far, it was the lead nations, which didn't work very well over the past 4 years, that Italy was doing judicial reform, US was doing the army building, Germans were building the national police, and Japan was doing the DDR. Now we are going to, under the compact, going to establish a monitoring organization to be staffed by the Afghan government and the United Nations to oversee the implementation process and to coordinate international assistance to make sure that aid is effectively delivered. And aid effectiveness was one of the main issues of the London conference, that over the past 4 years aid was not effectively delivered, or a lot of aid was wasted. Cases are like clinics without doctors and equipment, or schools God knows where without teachers and chairs, and people were just getting funding, going to do something and showing that they had done something. and also reforming the NGO law and screening NGOs to separate the real business NGOs from real non-profit NGOs who do effective work and have done so over the past 4 years. Because now we have so many NGOs that in reality are really construction companies. But since they can get grants and money and easy money from multilateral institutions, U.S. government, and their own countries, then they come under different names, and also to basically evade the tax issue. So a lot of problems. But this monitoring and coordination body, we hope would resolve the problem.
I want to thank you again
Sure.
for your excellent talk and everything you're saying on free hunger. I suppose I have a foreign policy question, which is probably your expertise. So
Sure.
you're good with that. One thing which you suggested a few times is, of course, the foreign influence, historical foreign influence from my country, from Pakistan, largely in Afghanistan. And there's been some suggestion in some media sources recently that the tension between Afghanistan and Pakistan could escalate at any point. And there's a 3 or 4 areas you mentioned, right? There's the Pashtun-Urul line situation, which I've spoken to Steve about a few times. And then there's Pakistan's own problems, the Balochi separatism, and another territorial issue with India and Kashmir. So I guess the general question is, are you optimistic that the tension between Afghanistan and Pakistan will be resolved, or do you fear that it will escalate, and whose court the ball is? And the more specific question is, I guess, what is the Afghan government official policy on Kashmir, the Durand line, and Balochi separatism?
Well, our relations, we're very optimistic with Pakistan. We call you a brotherly nation. And if just the example that all government officials give is, if you look at the volume of trade between Afghanistan and Pakistan now, and then the Taliban era, you will see that we can do a lot more in areas that would benefit both countries. During the Taliban period, we were trading with Pakistan only, I think, $30 million a year. And now that has increased to over $1 billion. I think it's $1.2 billion a year, and that's increasing. So the issue is really, cooperating on economic investment, trade interests of both countries. That if Afghanistan emerges as a hub that connects Central Asia with South Asia, then it would benefit everyone. It would benefit Pakistan, it would benefit Afghanistan, and it would benefit the neighborhood as a whole in terms of long-term economic integration and development. And what was the next?
The specific government position on the Durand line, Balochi separatism in Kashmir.
Yeah, we think that those are internal problems of the Pakistani government, that the issue of Balochistan, that of course we are concerned if we could cooperate and help Pakistan resolve that, we would, but that's an issue that they have to resolve, and the same goes for the Kashmir. That's an issue that they have to deal with India and work out. Yeah. Sure.
I'd like to ask a provocative question.
Sure.
I'm often struck by how wildly optimistic the U.S. democracy promotion agenda is when you compare what we're expecting of other countries to our own political development. For example, it took over 150 years for women to get the right to vote through the 19th Amendment in 1921 in this country. Yet we expect other countries to democratize completely, 100% suffrage, all at once. Do you think that has been a wise move in Afghanistan to deploy this, what I would call shock therapy for democratization, where suddenly you go from dictatorship to 100% voting all at once? Does that produce a backlash?
Not really, no.
Would it have been smarter to start with men first and then gradually phase in women?
No, I think our people were suppressed for so many years under different regimes, and most notably the Taliban, which basically shut down any hope for the women of Afghanistan. And one reason why women showed up so strongly in parliamentary elections is because of that they were suppressed, and also because that they have been the main victims of the wars of the past 25 years, because they've lost husbands, they've lost brothers, and they've ended up being supporters of large families in a society which doesn't allow them much to freedom to work and sustain their lives. Most people before our elections were talking about how democracy was going to be difficult to implement in Afghanistan, how our people were backward and traditional, and etc. There would be a backlash, as you said. But I think our people, although illiterate, although uneducated, they've been through 25 years of war, misery, internal displacement, refugee. That this experience has really made them resilient and in a way practically educated, in a way that they appreciate freedom and democracy and the good values that come with democracy more than anyone else. And so that's why that during our 2004 October presidential elections, 85% of Afghans, of the registered voters turned out to vote. And so given the chance, Afghanistan's and the people of Afghanistan will do better. But we shouldn't, at the same time, as you said, expect democracy to work in Afghanistan overnight. We should, I believe in developing democracy. That democracy is a process, it evolves, it develops. And so if we invest in democracy, if we invest in the social development of our people, then Afghanistan will continue to flourish. It will continue to flourish for itself and for the region and the wider world.
Let me actually add to Fatima Gilani. She was a constitution commissioner in Afghanistan. She helped write the new constitution. She recently now is the president of the Afghan Red Crescent Society. We have her here for tomorrow. She'll have an extensive talk on the role of women in the society and everything. But she wanted to comment on this question, so I thought, why not?
I want to add on what he said exactly. I agree that what we did was the right thing. But people from my generation, people like his generation, they haven't seen that war. I mean, they were born in war and they grew up, and thank God, eventually they saw themselves out of war. But I was brought up during the decade of democracy. And that was a democracy without the encouragement of Western countries, without the encouragement of, or even condition which came with aid from the Western countries. Earlier we were talking that when the first time girls went for further studies abroad, it was as early as 1921. And when we had women in the Senate, we had women in the Parliament, it was as early as 1964. When we had equal pay for the same job, in France they were fighting for it. When we had women voting in Afghanistan, in Switzerland, women were fighting for it. So it is in our culture, women being empowered is not a new thing, but we have to separate between three things. Here, when I read in the newspapers or when I hear from people, because you take for granted everything, you were born and brought up in it, you don't differentiate between three things: women's rights, liberalization, and democratization. Democracy in Afghanistan is what you see. Maybe the whole parliament will one day fill up. It's not just in Afghanistan, most of Muslim countries. Maybe very extremists will be voted in. Then if it is democracy, then we have to listen to what they say. Then that it doesn't matter. Even if for 1 year, one term, 2 terms, they are a little bit radical, we have to tolerate it, and slowly they find their middle way. But we have to, what you are saying is very important, that we have to come easy on liberalization. When liberty comes, which is in clash with our religion, with the people's way of living, even moderate people, people who were totally against Taliban, people who were totally against Al-Qaeda, but still very strict Muslims. That, yes, I agree with you. We have to go slowly. I mean, whether it is education for women, we have to go totally forcefully. Equal education at any expense. Equal opportunity to work at any expense. Equal opportunity in political participation in. But what you wear, I would be careful. I mean, in Kabul, I would wear exactly what I'm wearing now, but I would put a little scarf on my head, just to take it slowly and slowly. That I agree with you. That's all I want to add.
Thanks. We'll take a couple of more questions, and Sebastian has had his hand up.
Apart from the philanthropic reasons for the United States to be in other country at the moment, and as you mentioned, as a means to secure world peace, do you think that there's any other reasons for the U.S. to be there at the moment? That's the first question. And the second one is that do you think that the U.S. has had any impact on the writing of your new constitution and on the development and on maybe altering the development that your government would have taken otherwise if it had gone into democracy on its own?
Well, the first part, of course, as I mentioned during the talk, the U.S. is back to Afghanistan because the U.S. neglected Afghanistan for so long. Of course, the U.S. was engaged during 1980 supporting the Mujahideen against the Soviets, and very successfully the Soviets were, defeated during, of course, 80s. That resulted in their subsequent withdrawal from Afghanistan. And then the U.S. first disengaged, and with the U.S. entire world disengaged, which left our country in the hands of regional players, which turned the country into a battlefield of their proxy conflicts fought by divided Afghan factions. And that led basically to the takeover of the Taliban, and the Taliban, allowed Al-Qaeda terrorists and other terrorist groups to freely use the Afghan territory to launch worldwide terrorist attacks, primarily against the United States assets, and to the extent that they attacked the United States on 9/11 here at home. And so that took the U.S. back to Afghanistan to basically re-engage the world to build a collapsed state. People that were forgotten, as I said, during the entire 1990s. And so we hope that the U.S. will remain engaged both for its own national security interests and as well as for, ensuring peace and stability in Afghanistan with an impact, of course, on broader international peace and security. And on the second part, the Constitution was not, of course, influenced by the U.S. We had a constitutional law jirga, which Ms. Fatima Gilani attended. It was done by the representatives of the Afghan people from all over the country, which debated the language of the Constitution based on Afghanistan's 1964 Constitution. It was during the monarchy that we introduced the Constitution, and which they built on. And as a result, we got a new constitution that is more progressive and enlightened than any constitutions in the region. And the last part was? Yes.
That was it. Pavel, and then.
You briefly mentioned the difference between the situation in Iraq and in Afghanistan, and yet you said that basically the main difference is that in Afghanistan there is a wide support between the people for the current state of affairs. So my question is, what was the main difference between these two countries in the initial conditions that led to this wide disparity between the situation now, meaning that in Afghanistan we can see really an established state and the level of development is basically going forward and forward, whereas in Iraq there's over 100,000 U.S. troops and still the situation is very, very not stabilized, and the government is not stable.
Well, the reason why the U.S. went to Iraq is something that the U.S. government would be responsible to answer why they did. But the reason why they went to Afghanistan, I just explained. And the issue of support of human environment, I cannot overestimate that. That 4 years into the state-building process in Afghanistan, and although our people over the past 4 years have not benefited from the peace dividend, they are still optimistic. And they're optimistic. From my last experience in Kabul, I talked to everyone that had not benefited much from the process, yet they are still waiting, but yet they're optimistic. They're happy that the international community is back in Afghanistan, that their only concern is not why they are there or why the U.S. forces are in Afghanistan or why ISAF is there, but their concern is what if we are abandoned again. And it's that optimism that we hope that through the implementation of the Afghanistan Compact and the implementation of our national development strategy, we would be able to deliver public goods to these people, to the Afghan population that have sustained themselves over the past 25 years and are still patient and waiting for the government and the international community to deliver. And I think that's a strategic asset. That's a strategic asset for the U.S. forces and for the entire world community involved in Afghanistan to capitalize on that supportive human environment and to really, make our democracy a success, make the, post-conflict peace building a model that will, serve for other, post-conflict situations, and we have the potential for that.
Sure. One more. Okay. Now, sit down. I have 3 options. So why not keep it brief and have the 3?
You can pull them all together.
Yeah, why not? We can.
Yeah, why don't you listen to the questions and the secretary will note them down and then answer them all at once. How's that? Please.
It strikes me that when you're dealing with fundamentalist people who have very rigid worldviews, no matter what the country, that as soon as you have governments or big institutions kind of making laws about them, that it just squashes some of those beliefs down and you get lots of problems from it. So I'm wondering what kinds of things are going on in Afghanistan at a grassroots level for people to people, talking to some of these more fundamentalist people to soften some of their ideas and approach to life.
Well, by and large, people have bought into democracy and of course, freedom and the good values that bring. When democracy but prosperity, it's, investment in Afghanistan and enabling the Afghan society through education to, over time have more opportunities in life and their future, and also go out and explore the world. So that's how they look at it. And in Afghanistan, the issue is really one of lack of capacity within our institutions to deliver to people and to implement laws, the good laws that we have legislated over the past 4 years through presidential decrees, which now will be, studied by the parliament and to become final law or be reformed. So it is I think, lack of institutional capacity and the inability to deliver to these people that people are not happy with. Like corruption is one, and the red tape that exists is another, and also the fact that they've been waiting for too long to benefit from the peace dividend. That they say, what is the government doing? What is the international community is doing? So they want to see immediate, tangible, visible results from their investment in democracy and from placing their trust in democracy. So democracy has to deliver. If it doesn't deliver, then of course they will be alienated from democracy. And it's the kind of, I think, a situation that's happening in other parts of the world, especially in Latin American countries, where the people are moving from these so-called nominal democracies, from right-wing parties to left-wing parties. So there are examples that you could study. And so democracy is good. People like it, but they want results.
Let me just make one point, actually. We will stay here for the next 10 or 15 minutes after the secretary's speech is done. If you have questions left, you can come and talk to him personally. And then at 7:30, we have another event at Warner, where we will discuss more focused on the U.S. military presence in Afghanistan. I hope the secretary will be there to help us with that, and I'll be there to provide another viewpoint, so we can discuss more of the questions that are left out there. So, and now it's Professor Stenger's job to close it. Then we can, you can have a one-on-one.
Do you have a question? Go ahead.
Well, thank you all for coming. If you have questions, please come forward for an informal discussion.
Sure.
We would like to thank you for sharing your time with us and your
Thank
hopes
you.
for future of Afghanistan.
Sure.
This is a small present, but this is a middle-made present, which means that the whole community, our faculty, and the student body cares and is aware of Afghanistan, and will hope the best for Afghanistan in future.
Thank you so much. And of course, the best gift that Middlebury College has given me is two wonderful students, Zora and Asib. And I hope that we will get more Afghan students, as I mentioned, because we need future visionary leaders, and these people will make it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.